Ash Hollow had long stopped praying until one woman's sacrifice made God listen again. In the sunburned town of Ash Hollow, mercy is rarer than rain. Sheriff Cole Mathers once swore to protect the innocent, until a mistake stole a child's life, and his faith died with her. Now he keeps the peace with empty eyes and a loaded gun, punishing sinners he no longer believes can be saved. But when a traveling preacher's daughter named Hannah Lee steps off a wagon, carrying a worn Bible and a smile that won't quit, something shifts in the town, and in Cole. Folks say she's foolish. Cole says she's bound for heartbreak, but before the week's end, she'll walk into a storm meant for him, and change the meaning of salvation forever. Ash Hollow wasn't much more than a handful of buildings clinging to the edge of the desert, but the dust never stopped trying to bury it. Sheriff Cole Mathers watched it swirl across Main Street from his office window. Just another reminder that everything here was slowly dying, same as the folks in it. He sat in silence, hat tipped low, a half-drained bottle glinting in the slant of afternoon light. The clock ticked like a guilty conscience. He'd been sheriff for 6 years, but it was the last 3 that hollowed him out. The night the boy died, that was the line that split his life clean in two. He still saw it sometimes when he closed his eyes. The flash of a pistol, the scream, the small body crumpling in the dust. A mistake that no badge or Bible verse could wash away. Cole Mathers didn't pray anymore, the town didn't either. The church bell had gone silent, its rope rotted through. Folks figured God stopped listening when the mines dried up and the funerals outnumbered the weddings. That's when the preacher's wagon came rolling down Main Street, sun-bleached, creaking, with scripture carved into its sides. A tall, wiry man drove it, face weathered but eyes steady. Beside him sat a young woman, bonnet tipped back, hair the color of late wheat, Hannah Lee. She stepped down first, dust clinging to the hem of her dress, and looked around at the dead town like she could see something worth saving. Cole leaned against a post outside his office, watching her. The townsfolk watched too, some curious, most smirking. They'd seen preachers before and none lasted long, but there was something different in her gaze, not defiant, just steady. She smiled at a child hiding behind a barrel, at an old drunk asleep in the shade, even at Cole himself. Her father greeted folks, announcing they'd come to reopen the old chapel on the hill. Laughter rolled through the saloon doors. "Lord ain't got business here no more," someone called out. Cole turned away. He'd learned not to interfere in a town's mockery. Justice was simple. Faith was messy. By sundown, Hannah and her father had settled by the abandoned church. Cole rode past on his rounds, meaning to ignore them, but stopped when he saw her dragging a broken door off its hinges. She worked with her sleeves rolled up, hands blistered, humming a hymn no one in town remembered. "Place ain't fit to sleep in, let alone pray," he said from horseback. She shaded her eyes and smiled. "Then it's due for a little mercy," Cole grunted, tipping his hat. "Mercy doesn't come easy out here." "Neither does hope," she said softly. "But it's still worth planting." He rode off before she could say more. That night, laughter spilled from the saloon as Cole walked by. The piano clanked, boots stomped, and whiskey washed away the weight of another empty day. Then the room went still, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. The doors swung open. A man stepped in, dust-covered, eyes burning with purpose. Cole recognized him instantly, Jed Carver. The outlaw's brother had died 3 years ago, in the same shootout that broke Cole's faith. Carver's gaze found him across the saloon. "Heard you're still wearing that star, Mathers," he said. "Shame. Should have buried it with the boy you killed." The room tensed. Cole's hand hovered near his gun but didn't move. "Not this time." Carver smiled, cruel and cold. "Don't worry, Sheriff. I'll be seeing you again soon." He left like thunder fading in the distance, leaving only silence behind. Cole stood there, still as stone, the weight of every sin pressing down on him. Outside, from the dark end of the street, a lantern flickered, Hannah Lee's light, burning in the window of the chapel. Cole turned toward it, jaw tight, and whispered to no one. "You don't know what this town does to believers, Miss Lee." But somehow deep down he feared she just might. The morning after Jed Carver's arrival, the town of Ash Hollow felt tighter, meaner. Folks whispered over coffee and whiskey alike. They'd seen vengeance ride in before, but this time, it had a name they all remembered. Sheriff Cole Mathers sat outside his office, hat low, watching the street with that same stone-faced calm he'd worn since the night everything broke. But under the brim his eyes were restless. Carver's words from the saloon still rang through his mind like a tolling bell. By noon, the gossip reached every corner of town. Carver's looking to finish what his brother started. Cole didn't bother denying it. Maybe he even wanted it. That was when Hannah Lee came walking down Main Street with a basket of bread. The townsfolk watched her pass, a few with pity, most with scorn. Her father preached outside the old church steps, voice thin but earnest, trying to stir hope in people who'd forgotten the sound of it. "God's grace ain't gone from Ash Hollow," he said, "only waiting for hearts brave enough to welcome it back." Someone in the crowd laughed. "Grace doesn't fill bellies or fix graves, preacher." The laughter spread, sharp and cruel. Cole watched from across the street, waiting for it to pass. But then Hannah stepped forward, eyes clear and voice steady. "Maybe not," she said, "but neither does hate." The street went quiet. Her gaze found Cole's for a moment, long enough to make him look away. That night a note was slipped under the sheriff's door. No words, just a single bullet carved with the initials JC and the word sunrise. Cole didn't need more. The duel was set. He sat alone in the dark, lantern flickering. His gun lay on the desk, polished, loaded, waiting. He ran a thumb over the metal, familiar, cold, honest. Death at least never lied. A soft knock broke the silence. "Sheriff Mathers?" He opened the door to find Hannah standing there, hands clasped around a small tin of salve. "Your horse took a bad cut on the leg today," she said gently. "I mended it as best I could. Figured you'd want to know." Cole blinked, unsure how to answer. "Appreciate it, miss." "You didn't have to trouble yourself," she smiled faintly. "Seems you're used to folks keeping their distance." "Safer that way." Hannah studied him, then placed the tin on his desk. Beside it she laid a folded scrap of paper. "Something my pa read this morning," she said. "Thought it might suit you better." He waited until she'd gone to unfold it. A verse scrawled in her hand. "Come now, let us reason together, saith the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." Cole stared at the words until they blurred. Then he folded the paper again, tucked it into his coat pocket, and poured another drink. By dawn, word spread that the sheriff was going to face Carver. At the edge of town, the air hung thick in that stillness before gunsmoke. Carver waited in the street, pistol glinting in the first light. His voice carried, low and cutting. "You ready to pay what's owed, Sheriff?" Cole stepped forward, slow and steady. "Been ready a long time?" But before either could draw, a voice broke through the hush, no, strong, clear, feminine. "Enough." Hannah stood at the end of the street, skirt dusted, Bible clutched to her chest. "No life's worth another death," she cried. Carver sneered. "Lady, this ain't your fight." "It is if it's about forgiveness," she answered. "Because grace ain't given to the blameless." Cole's jaw tightened. "Miss Lee, go home." "This ain't for you." She shook her head, eyes wet but steady. "Then maybe that's the problem, Sheriff. You keep thinking mercy's meant for someone else," the crowd murmured, uneasy. Carver spat in the dust. "You talk too much, girl." Hannah didn't flinch. "And you hate too much." Cole raised a hand, motioning her back. But her words had already struck something deep inside him, a truth he'd buried under guilt and whiskey. When the clock tower struck once, Carver's voice cut through the air. "Dawn tomorrow, Sheriff. One way or another, this ends." He walked off, leaving the promise of blood behind. Hannah stood there, trembling, watching Cole holster his gun. "You plan to die tomorrow," she whispered. "Reckon it's the only piece I've got left." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a prayer. Then maybe you ain't been looking in the right place. Cole looked away, unable to meet her eyes, because for the first time in years, something inside him was starting to hurt again. And it wasn't just guilt. The sun dropped low behind the hills, bleeding red into the horizon, the color of things that couldn't be undone. Sheriff Cole Mathers sat in the stillness of his office, cleaning his revolver one last time. Every click of the cylinder echoed like a confession. Outside, the town of Ash Hollow held its breath. No one dared speak to him, not even the old drunk who usually greeted him with slurred curses. They all knew what dawn would bring. Cole holstered the gun and stood. The clock struck 8. He should have gone home to his empty room above the livery, but his boots turned toward the hill instead, toward the faint lantern light flickering from the chapel windows. He told himself he was only checking on things. But the truth was simpler and far heavier. He needed to see her. Hannah Lee knelt by the altar, mending a torn hymnal by candlelight. Dust swirled in the air, and every breath carried the faint scent of old wood and oil. She looked up when the door creaked open. "Evening, Sheriff." Cole hesitated in the doorway, hat in hand. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't?" She smiled faintly. "Though you look like a man who could use interrupting." He stepped inside, the boards creaking beneath his boots. "You and your pa shouldn't be here alone. Carver's kind don't scare easily." "Neither does Faith," she said simply. Cole exhaled through his nose. "Faith didn't stop that bullet 3 years ago." Her eyes softened. "No, but it might have helped you survive it." He looked away, jaw tight. "That boy, he was 10. I pulled the trigger that ended him. Tell me where Faith belongs in that." Hannah stood, walking to the front pew. "Maybe not in the shot fired. Maybe in what you do after." "I tried," he muttered. "Tried to be the law, to make things right. But you forgot to forgive the one person who needed it most," she said. He turned to her, anger flickering under the surface. "You don't know me, miss." "No," she admitted. "But I know what guilt looks like. My mother died when I was 14. Fever took her while my pa was off preaching. I blamed him, blamed God too. Spent years refusing to pray. But one night I realized my anger hadn't brought her back, only buried me deeper beside her." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "That's what guilt does, Sheriff. It builds you a grave and convinces you to lie in it." Cole's shoulders sagged. "Then maybe I've been lying there too long." She moved closer, gently placing a folded scrap of paper on the pew beside him. "You've carried enough death, Cole Mathers. Maybe it's time you start carrying life again." He unfolded it, another verse. This one carefully written, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Something inside him cracked then, not loudly, but enough for him to feel it. Before leaving, she turned toward him. "You'll face Carver tomorrow. I know that. But don't do it thinking God's turned his back. Sometimes he just lets us walk through the fire to remember what mercy feels like." Her words lingered long after she'd gone. Cole couldn't sleep. He walked the quiet streets till the stars blurred above him. Around midnight, he found himself by the corral, his horse standing restless, legs still wrapped where Hannah had tended it. Tied to the saddle horn was a small scrap of paper, fluttering in the wind. He pulled it free, recognizing her neat handwriting. "You are not beyond grace." He read it twice before tucking it into his coat. The horizon paled gray, dawn creeping closer. Cole stood at the edge of town, revolver heavy at his side, heart heavier still. He whispered into the wind, "If this is how it ends, Lord, just let it mean something." But before the first light broke, he saw her again. Hannah standing quietly by the chapel steps, hands clasped in prayer. And for a fleeting moment, Sheriff Cole Mathers wondered if Faith hadn't been gone after all, just waiting for someone brave enough to show him where to look. The dawn came cold and colorless, a pale mist hanging low over Ash Hollow. Every door along Main Street was shut, curtains drawn, the kind of silence that townsfolk reserved for funerals. The duel wasn't just between two men anymore. It was between what the town had become and what it still might be. Sheriff Cole Mathers walked down that dirt street like a man heading to the gallows. His boots left prints that the wind tried to erase. The star on his chest glinted once in the gray light before he tore it free and slipped it into his pocket. The law couldn't save him now. At the far end of the street stood Jed Carver, waiting. Hat low, a pistol on his hip, grinned like a wolf who'd been hungry too long. "Morning, Sheriff," Carver called. "Wasn't sure you'd have the spine to show." Cole's voice was calm. "I ain't hiding," Carver spat into the dust. 3 years I've been riding with this hate. 3 years of staring at my brother's grave, knowing you're breathing and he ain't. I'll see justice done." Cole nodded once, then draw. But before either man moved, the sound of footsteps cut through the air, soft but sure. Hannah Lee stepped into the street. Gasps rippled through the alleys where townsfolk watched in secret. The preacher's daughter, white dress brushed with dust, stood between them like a line God himself might have drawn. "Hannah," Cole said sharply. "Get back." She didn't, her voice carried, strong and steady. "This ends here." "Not with blood," Carver sneered. "You think preaching can fix what he broke? My brother's dead, girl. And killing him won't bring yours back," she said. "It'll just bury another man beside him." Her words hung in the air, trembling like glass. Carver's eyes hardened. "Step aside." Cole's hand hovered near his holster. "Miss Lee, please go." She shook her head slowly. "You can't make peace with a grave, Sheriff. Only with the living." Cole's throat tightened. "You don't understand." "I do," she cut in. "You think you're paying for your sin by dying. But redemption don't come from death. It comes from what you do after you live." The town clock struck once. The echo rolled across the valley. Carver's voice was a growl now. "Move, girl." But Hannah stood her ground, tears glinting in her eyes. "Then shoot me too, Jed Carver. If your justice can't tell mercy from vengeance, maybe you've forgotten which is which." The outlaw's jaw clenched. For a moment, the tremor in his hand betrayed him. A flash of doubt, gone as quickly as it came. "Last warning," he hissed. "Then I reckon that's all I need," she said. Cole took a half step forward, his voice breaking. "Hannah, don't—" And that's when the world cracked open. A single shot split the air. Sharp, merciless. Cole saw the flash before he heard it. Instinct took over. He drew, fired once, the bullet finding Carver's chest. But the sound that followed wasn't the outlaw falling. It was Hannah. She staggered back, hand clutching her side, blood blooming through the fabric like a crimson flower. Cole caught her before she hit the ground, the world spinning around them. Carver dropped his gun and collapsed, eyes wide with shock. The duel was over before it began. "Hannah," Cole's voice broke, raw and desperate. He pressed his hand against the wound, but the blood kept coming. Why would you do this?" Her lips trembled. She reached for his face with shaking fingers. "Because," she whispered, breath shallow, "you were already forgiven. Long before you believed it." Her hand fell away. Cole's world went still. No sound. No breath. No God. Just the dying echo of her words and the weight of her blood on his hands. He looked skyward, tears cutting through the dust on his face. "If you're up there," he rasped, "you took the wrong one." But the only answer was the wind, carrying the faint toll of a bell from the chapel on the hill. The moment the gunshot faded, silence fell over Ash Hollow, the kind that makes even the wind afraid to move. Smoke curled above the street and the smell of gunpowder hung thick. Cole knelt in the dust, Hannah's head resting against his arm, her blood seeping warm through his shirt. Around them, townsfolk peeked from doorways, wide-eyed and trembling. No one dared speak. "Hannah," he whispered, shaking her gently. "Stay with me." Her breath came shallow, her face pale beneath the morning light. "Pa," she gasped. Cole turned toward the chapel on the hill. "Someone get her father," he shouted. Boots scrambled and a few men ran. The rest stood frozen, staring at their sheriff, the man they'd called Hollow, now holding the only light the town had left. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You shouldn't have done it," he said, voice breaking. "That bullet was meant for me." Her lips curved in a faint, weak smile. "Maybe it was meant to find Grace instead." Her words hit him harder than any bullet could. He pulled her closer, cradling her like something sacred. "Don't talk like that. You're gonna make it." But even as he said it, he knew he was lying. By the time the preacher arrived, panting and pale, Hannah's eyes were half closed. "Pa," she whispered. "Don't cry. Tell him God don't waste pain." Her father knelt beside her, tears falling freely. "Hush now, child. Save your strength." She shook her head weakly. "It's not strength I need. It's peace." Her gaze found Cole's again. "And so do you." Cole's throat burned. "I don't deserve it." "None of us do," she breathed. "That's why it's Grace." Her hand slipped from his. Her chest rose once more, then stilled. The preacher bowed his head, whispering a prayer too broken to hear. Cole sat there frozen, until the preacher gently closed her eyes. For a long moment, the town didn't move. The outlaw's body still lay in the dust. The crowd gathered in stunned silence, watching the sheriff who'd never cried finally break. He lifted her in his arms, slow and reverent, and began walking toward the chapel. Each step left a trail of red on the dirt. The preacher followed, whispering scripture. The townsfolk followed too, and not out of faith, but out of something deeper. Maybe shame, maybe awe. Inside the chapel, Cole lay her down on the altar she'd worked so hard to restore. Light filtered through the broken window, landing across her still face. He dropped to his knees beside her, hat falling from his hand. "Lord," his voice was a rasp torn from somewhere deep. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore, but if you can hear me, she didn't deserve this. Not her." He gripped the edge of the altar. "If you wanted me to see something, I see it now. You hear me? I see it. You gave me a reason to believe again, and you took it away." The preacher rested a hand on his shoulder. "Son, she wasn't taken. She was given." Cole looked up, hollow-eyed. "She lived what she preached," the preacher said softly. "She gave her life for mercy, even for a man who'd lost his faith." Cole bowed his head, voice breaking. "Then what am I supposed to do with what's left of me?" The preacher looked toward the door, where the first drops of rain began to fall. Soft, slow, pure. Maybe start by letting him have it. That night, the drought broke. Rain fell hard over Ash Hollow for the first time in years, washing blood and dust from the streets. The chapel bell, untouched for 3 long years, tolled once in the storm, clear and strong. And for a town that thought it had buried faith long ago, the sound was like a heartbeat returning. Inside, Cole knelt by the altar until dawn, Hannah's Bible clutched in his hands, the pages soaked with rain and tears alike. The storm raged through the night, thunder rolling like a judgment long delayed. Rain washed the blood from Main Street, carried it into the thirsty earth, and with it, a little of the guilt that had chained Ash Hollow for years. By morning, the air was clean. The sky cracked open with light. Sheriff Cole Mathers stepped out of the chapel, hat in hand, eyes hollow from the night he hadn't slept. His coat was still damp, and his badge, the same one he'd torn off before the duel, hung from his fingers, heavy and dull. He walked to the gallows post outside his office, where once he'd hung outlaws and drunkards who'd lost their way. Now it was just a bare beam, slick with rain. Cole stared at it, then at the badge. "You were supposed to stand for justice," he murmured, voice hoarse. "But maybe all you ever did was stand in mercy's way." He placed the star on the beam, letting it rest there in silence. From behind, a voice said quietly, "The town will need a sheriff again." It was Marshal Briggs, from Carson County, an old friend who'd ridden in that morning after hearing word of the duel. His coat was soaked, his expression weary. Cole shook his head. "They need a man of faith, not a man like me." Briggs studied him. "She believed in you, didn't she?" Cole's jaw tightened. "She died for me." "No," Briggs said. She died so you'd start living again. The words hit like a hammer. The town buried Hannah Lee on the hill behind the chapel, beneath a willow that had stood through drought and storm alike. The preacher led the service, voice trembling but steady. "The good Lord gave us his word," he said, eyes on his daughter's grave, "but he also gives us people, living reminders of his mercy. My Hannah was one." Cole stood apart from the others, hat pressed to his chest. Rainwater dripped from the brim, but he didn't move. Every word felt carved straight into him. When the crowd drifted away, he stayed. The preacher lingered too, hands clasped before him. "She forgave you, Sheriff," the preacher said gently. Cole's voice was little more than a whisper. "I don't know how to live with that." The preacher looked toward the sky, where a pale sun pushed through gray clouds. "Then learn. Start by letting it change what you do next." That evening, Cole returned to his office, the same room that had held years of silence, regret, and whiskey. He opened the drawer, pulled out the half-empty bottle, and set it on the desk. He uncorked it, stared for a moment, then poured it out onto the floorboards. The sharp scent filled the air, stinging his eyes, or maybe that was something else burning behind them. Next, he took Hannah's Bible from his coat. The pages were warped with rain, her handwriting fading but still there, of verses, underlines, and small notes in the margins. He turned to the one she'd left for him last. "You are not beyond grace." Cole sat there for a long time, staring at the words, until the town clock struck 9. Then he rose, straightened his coat, and walked to the chapel. Inside, the preacher was kneeling, fixing the cracked floorboards. He looked up, surprised. "Didn't think I'd see you here so soon." Cole set the Bible down on the pew. "You'll need help rebuilding. Roof leaks, floors half gone, bell ropes frayed." The preacher smiled faintly. "That a man talking? Or a sheriff?" Cole hesitated. "Just a man, trying to learn what comes after forgiveness." The preacher nodded. "Then you're exactly where you ought to be." Cole glanced toward the altar, Hannah's hymn book still resting there. The candle beside it flickered once, as if the air itself breathed. Outside, the sky broke open into gold, sunlight spilling through the cracked window, landing across her grave, and for the first time in years, Cole Mathers closed his eyes, not to escape the past, but to give thanks that somehow, through blood and grace, faith had found its way back to Ash Hollow. The sun rose soft over Ash Hollow the next morning, gilding the rooftops, drying the last of the storm's tears. The town was quieter than usual, not dead quiet, but calm. The kind that feels like something wounded has started to heal. Sheriff Cole Mathers, no longer wearing the badge, carried a hammer in one hand and a coil of rope in the other as he made his way to the chapel. His steps were slow, steady, almost reverent. The chapel's door, once hanging by a single hinge, now stood straight again. He and the preacher had worked through the night, fixing what time and despair had broken. The pews were sanded smooth, the windows scrubbed clean. It wasn't much, but it was something to believe in. Cole dropped the hammer on the bench and looked up at the belfry. The bell rope dangled, frayed and muddy. "Guess it's time," he muttered. The preacher, standing nearby, nodded. "It ain't rung in years. Think the town's ready to hear it again?" Cole gave a faint smile. "I think they're needin' it more than ready." He climbed the steps to the belfry, boots thudding on the wood. Rain had left the boards slick, but he moved carefully, sure-footed. At the top, he found the great bell blackened by time. He tied the new rope with steady hands, looping it tight, testing its strength when he pulled once. A deep, low tone rolled over the valley, while steady, pure, alive down below. People stepped out of their homes, blinking into the light. Shopkeepers paused mid-sweep. Children stopped their play. Even the saloon door stilled in its swing. The sound carried far, touching every corner of town. For the first time in years, Ash Hollow listened. Cole climbed down, breathing hard but smiling faintly. The preacher met him at the bottom with a look that said more than words could. "She'd have loved that sound," the preacher said softly. Cole nodded, eyes glassy. She's the reason it rings again. They stepped outside. The street glistened with morning dew, and the world smelled clean, new. A few townsfolk approached, awkward but earnest. The blacksmith, the storekeeper's wife, even the drunk who'd lived off the saloon's porch. "Sheriff," one began, then hesitated, glancing at the missing badge. Cole raised a hand gently. "Ain't sheriff no more," the man cleared his throat. "Well, whatever you are now, we're glad you stayed." Another voice. The saloon keeper's wife this time. "You think the church will be holding service again?" Cole looked toward the preacher, who gave a small nod. "Every Sunday," the preacher said. "And any day someone's got a heart heavy enough to need it." That got a few smiles, a few nods. People began to talk softly, like they were remembering how. Cole stood back and watched them, the faint hum of life stirring again in the place he once thought God had abandoned. He turned toward the hill, toward the small white cross that marked Hannah's grave. Beneath the willow, the preacher followed his gaze. "You go on," he said. She'd like the company. Cole made the walk alone. The earth was still damp, grass fresh and green where none had grown before. He knelt beside the cross, hat in hand, and stayed quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough around the edges. "You got what you came for, didn't you? You and your pa brought faith back to this place, and to a fool who didn't think it could live in him anymore." The wind stirred, soft and warm, brushing the willow's branches against the grave. He smiled faintly. "You once told me redemption's about living, not dying. Guess I finally understand." He reached into his coat and pulled out the star-shaped badge. It caught the sunlight for a heartbeat, bright, untarnished. "I can't wear it anymore," he said, "but it doesn't belong buried neither." He stood, walked back to the chapel, and stepped inside. There, beneath the wooden cross at the front, he hung the badge, not as a symbol of law, but of what it took to find grace. He stepped back, eyes glistening in the morning light, and whispered, "She took my bullet, but gave me back something I'd buried deeper than any grave: faith." The chapel bell tolled again, this time not for death, but for life renewed. And in that sound, the town of Ash Hollow remembered hope. Days turned to weeks in Ash Hollow, and the town began to breathe again. The saloon quieted down earlier each night. The blacksmith's forge rang bright in the mornings. The preacher's chapel filled slowly, first with silence, then with hymns. And there was Sheriff Cole Mathers, though no one called him sheriff anymore. Now he came each dawn not to enforce but to build. His badge hung beneath the church's wooden cross, glinting softly in the candlelight. He split wood, hammered nails, repaired pews, and fed the horses at the back stable. He spoke little, smiled more. The townsfolk still looked to him for steadiness, but now it wasn't fear or authority that held their respect. It was grace itself. One late afternoon, as the sky turned gold, the preacher stood outside the chapel watching him work. Cole was mending the fence near the graveyard, sleeves rolled up, hands rough from labor. "Never thought I'd see the day," the preacher said with a warm chuckle. Cole glanced up. "What days is that, Reverend?" "The day Ash Hollow had more prayer than whiskey." Cole gave a small grin, hammering another nail. "Maybe it just needed a little rain to wash the dust off." The preacher's gaze softened. "Or maybe it needed a storm." Cole paused, leaning on the fence rail. "Storm took a lot from you." The preacher nodded slowly. "Aye, but it gave back something too." They both looked toward the willow on the hill, where a breeze tugged at the leaves and sunlight danced through. Hannah's cross stood there, plain and white, surrounded by wildflowers that hadn't bloomed in years. As evening fell, the townsfolk gathered at the chapel for the first proper service since the drought. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of hope rediscovered. Mothers hushed their children. Men who hadn't prayed in years removed their hats. The preacher stepped to the front, voice steady as he read from the book his daughter once carried through dust and ridicule. "And I will give you a new heart, and put a new spirit within you." His voice trembled. Just once. Cole sat near the back, hat on his knee, head bowed. When the final hymn rose, rough, uneven, but earnest, he joined in. His voice wasn't strong, but it was sure. Outside, the bell rang again. Not for mourning. Not for war. For grace. Later, when the service ended and the people drifted home under the starlit sky, Cole stayed behind. He walked the aisle slowly, fingertips brushing the wooden pews Hannah once dreamed of filling. At the altar, he stopped. The badge still hung beneath the cross. He reached out but didn't touch it. Instead, he knelt. No words came at first, only silence. The same kind of silence that had haunted him for years, but this time it felt different. Not empty. Waiting. Finally, he whispered, "Thank you for sending her." A faint wind stirred through the open door, carrying with it the soft rustle of the willow leaves from the hill. Cole lifted his head, eyes glimmering with peace he hadn't known since that terrible night years ago. He stood, walked to the door, and stepped into the cool night air. The first light of dawn spilled softly over Ash Hollow, washing the town in gold and quiet. The chapel bell tolled once more, deep and steady, its echo rolling across the valley like a heartbeat renewed. To a stranger passing through, Ash Hollow looked no different than it ever had. The same dust curling along the streets, the same wind sighing through cracked shutters, the same faces worn by years of hard living. But for those who stayed, and for one man in particular, everything had changed. Cole Mather stood beside the chapel he had helped rebuild, hat in hand, eyes lifted to the pale morning sky. He listened to the bell, to the rhythm of it, to the peace that now lived in the sound. He knew what it meant to feel rain on parched ground, to feel mercy touch a heart gone dry. Once he had believed faith was something a man had to hold on to, like a badge or a gun, something earned, something kept. But now he understood. Faith wasn't carried by hands or held by will. It was the quiet strength that carried him, and sometimes when a man lost it, someone else had to bear it for him, until he found his way back. A faint breeze stirred, lifting the edge of his coat, whispering through the open door of the chapel. Cole's gaze softened as he looked up at the cross, and at the badge gleaming faintly beneath it. "She took my bullet," he murmured, voice low and sure, "but gave me back something I'd buried deeper than any grave: faith." If this story moved your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of faith, love, and redemption from the Wild West. Your support helps keep these stories alive, one frontier soul at a time.